With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Okay, let's talk about everybody's favorite company, Amazon. For and against, it is all over the news. It is in your homes or on your porch. Hopefully nobody stole it. Porch pirates is a different subject, though. Caden Rosenbaum, new voice, new face. Always excited to have new people on the show. Sharp guy. We're going to be talking a little Amazon with him. Caden, how are you today, sir? Thank you so much for the time.
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. We've been talking about Amazon a lot. Let's start big picture for just a second, though, because you're going to use a specific example here. So let's start big, though, because everybody's got an opinion on Amazon because they're that dominant in the market. Everybody knows what they are. They probably have one of the higher name recognitions of any brand and company in the world, I would think, especially at least in the Western world. As a company, because we know people, they're picking at them about the labor stuff. They pick on them about the monopoly stuff. Bezos, of course, is a lightning rod because of various things, both personal and professional. And they're just a massive company. What's your take overall on Amazon, just so we have a baseline here? Because a lot of people, it's just a place to buy stuff and it gets to your house quick. But there's this whole other political side to Amazon too, isn't there?
Well, I guess I should preface with a little conflict of interest here. I've been a Prime subscriber for I don't know how many years, and I'm a big fan, right? But beyond just that, I think Amazon is a great service to consumers, and overall, it's done what even Walmart couldn't have done even back in the day. Is it brings you products from way off places for cheap prices, and it's always convenient. It's got 2-day shipping now.
And some places, like where I live, they're building a brand new distribution center out here. We're going to have even less than 48 hours. You mentioned Walmart. I think that's something important to bring up here because I'm older than you. Almost all the criticisms I hear about Amazon, they're a monopoly. They're too powerful. They're destroying small businesses. They're doing this, that, and the other. Almost word for word, the labor stuff. Although, not that they don't have probably some sketchy labor practices that should be investigated. Almost word for word. All the criticism in mass news media and in the commentariat that I hear about Amazon is all the stuff I heard about Walmart 20, 25, 30 years ago. It's the same story over again. It's a new narrative. Isn't part of this, though, is just whoever the biggest guy on the block is, or the biggest company on the block, or the biggest whoever that's in our cultural notice, they're going to get most of the slings and arrows when it comes to issues like this.
Yeah, I mean, it really feels like deja vu, doesn't it? I think it was back in 2004, 2005 when Walmart was the big bully on the block that was being taken on by Congress. And really, this isn't a new trend in American politics or American economics. This goes back to the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890. The big argument was that the companies would overtake the government or capture regulatory control by influencing legislators with money. That started back in 1890, went to 1914 when the Clayton Act was passed, both antitrust acts in the federal Congress. And the concerns were always the same. The companies are so dominant that they would overthrow the government. That was the big concern. And fast forward to today, we know that almost all of the companies that everyone was concerned about at the time no longer exist or are wildly unprofitable compared to the new dominant players. It's always a business cycle of dominant versus new versus upcoming. And it's easy to argue that there's wide corporate control when there's a new player on the block or someone that you don't quite understand, such as big tech companies. But really, in the grand scheme of things, this is all the same as it's always been. It will always be a big company that rises and then a new player that comes in and knocks them down a few.
Yeah, especially when you're dealing with somebody that's a disruptor in a sector. Like Walmart disrupted and they made their money. It wasn't their stores and their cheap prices. Those cheap prices came from they did a world-class way of doing logistics. That's where they became Walmart. But then that same logistics thing is what kind of addled them the last few years when Amazon came up, because now Amazon got rid of all the overhead. They don't have to do all the logistics that Walmart does. Yeah. These things go in cycles. I think it's a great point to point out. that brings me to something that you touch on in your articles we're going to talk about. But we've talked about this in the legal realm. We talk about this in the technology realm. We talk about this in a lot of other realms. This is one of those things where legislation and regulation and the law is always chasing, and they're never going to catch up. I'm always really leery, and you just mentioned it with Amazon. They want to regulate Amazon. They want to regulate Facebook is a good example of this. Well, by the time they get around to regulating Facebook, my teenagers don't use Facebook. That's 2 technologies ago for them. You see what I'm saying? Like, we tend to regulate way behind. So you can say Amazon needs regulation, but by the time they actually get around to doing it, the market's already changed again. Is there any way to bridge that gap where the legislation and the regulation actually keeps up, or are they just going to keep chasing the next big thing and be behind the curve, do you think?
Well, the prevailing trend for the last, I'd say 40 years, since about 1983, was to just focus on consumer welfare. If a company is actually being unfair or deceptive and harming consumer welfare, meaning they can obtain goods at a cheap price that are quality, if a company is harming that consumer welfare, then they ought to be looked at and face antitrust scrutiny. But if they're doing good by the consumer, if they're giving good prices for good products, then there's no reason to break them up. They're a good value add to consumers. These days, with some shifts in the FTC, the standard has changed quite a bit. And it's no longer about consumer welfare. It's about size, power, and monetary dominance. And that's one measure of looking at it. But in the grand scheme of things, if we just look back only a century, that's not the way that the economy works. It's always going to be cyclical. And I don't know about you, but just one of the things that Walmart has done to try to keep up with Amazon is grocery delivery. And that was a great move, spurred on by Uber Eats and DoorDash and Instacart. And if we expect companies to grow, it's going to be because other smaller players like DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Instacart move in and show a different kind of product. And that's exactly what Amazon did to rise to power. It's exactly what Walmart did. It's almost just it's almost naive to say that that's not going to happen again.
Yeah, Cade Rosenbaum joins us. Put your lawyer hat on for just a second, then we're going to go through a couple of the examples you've been writing about Amazon, though. But size and market dominance does not equal a monopoly. Now, I know on Twitter those two things are used interchangeably, but that's not really the case, is it?
Oh, no, not at all. There's a countless number of antitrust factors that you should be looking at to figure out if a company is a true monopoly or not. There first has to be complete market dominance, which is market control. And the big problem there is you have to define the market. The latest one that we'll be talking about later is the market for smart home devices. What does that mean? Is it just Alexa? Is it the little robot vacuums? Is it also the smart bulbs that go in your house? What is the market for smart home devices? That's the first test. You figure out what that means, and then you get to the point where you figure out who has the most dominant position. And what constitutes dominance really is also up to interpretation. If you can somehow get across all of those boundaries, then you have to show that there's consumer harm because of monopoly or foreseeable consumer harm. And all of that takes years, if even decades, as Microsoft saw in their case that was recently settled, started in the early 2000s and was only recently settled.
Yeah, which goes back to what we were just talking about of the regulation always running behind these things. You got to be kind of cognizant of it.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Okay, so that's the terminology of it. Let's get to a couple of the examples you were writing about. Caden Rosenbaum joining us. By the way, he's got one of the greatest Twitter header pictures I've ever seen. I'm not going to ruin it for you. Just go find it. We're linking to it. You see it. I love it so much, but that's one of
my wedding photographer was a fellow lawyer, and she took a great picture of me, Kathleen Burke.
Yeah. And his header take is even better. You have two examples here. You mentioned it already, so let's start with the robot vacuum things. I was actually joking with my kids because I've got one of these things, and I got the little app on my phone, and it actually, I can watch on the app. The first time I turned it on, it maps the house, right? It goes around, maps the house, and I was showing him, it looks almost like the old Tetris or something. Like, when I was a kid, this was a really good video game. Now this is the vacuum cleaning my house. That's how much technology has changed. When people think about a technology change like this, it's silly. It's like, well, it's a robot vacuum, and it doesn't replace cleaning the floor. It just kind of does that first layer. I still got to clean the floor, but it is a nice convenience, and it is something that's electronic, and it is one of those things that is online, and it's an app on my phone. Like, because I'll be recording a show like this, and I forget, and I got to go turn it off real quick. I got an app on my phone. People, when something's in your house like that, it gets personal. You mentioned Alexa, and the other home things. Google's got one. Apple's got one. Everybody's got one of these things now. The Ring doorbells isn't part of this. Before we even get to the politics and the policy and the legal part of it, we are personalizing much more of this technology. It's in our home. It's a daily thing. That changes how we deal with it before you even get to the rest of it, doesn't it?
It could. It depends on the way you look at it. Do you want less technology in your home to personalize and make your life more convenient, or do you want more? For me personally, I have more. I mean, all the lights in this room right now are smart bulbs. I've got an Alexa over there in the corner. I'm really surprised it hasn't gone off yet. And I have a iRobot upstairs to vacuum up my dog hair for me. It's all very convenient for me because I don't have to spend 30 minutes to an hour, vacuuming or cleaning. There's a robot that I can ask questions to instead of going and Googling them myself. My life is extremely convenient, and that's my choice. It's really about choice, whether you want that or whether you'd like a lifestyle where things are more analog, where you live a little more off grid. And I don't think that we're coming to a point where you have to make the choice one way or the other. I think the choice is still in the hands of the consumer, and that's great.
Where it should be, because like me, we've got 4 dogs. So that's basically what my poor little robot does. Is I could have a 5th dog by the time that thing runs. But that's my limit on the technology. Is I have that. I don't have anything voice activated. I don't have things that record in the house. That's just my personal line, and we can, people can argue that, but I don't like it. I don't like things listening to me. I don't like things recording me. We know how those things work, but that's my line. But that should be a consumer choice thing, not a regulatory thing, is what we're really driving at here, because they may not want a motorized vacuum. They may want everything in their house voice activated. They may have,
Sure.
people with disabilities. This stuff is fantastic for them because they can voice activate things that they can't physically get. How much of our policy on things like this, when you're talking about an Amazon or you're talking about an Apple, or Ring doorbells, another great one of these, how much of our policy do we have to be careful about our need to regulate everything, when really a lot of this stuff should be all of the above, not picking and choosing, correct?
Well, I think that's a good start to the conversation. I mean, for example, if in the market there is a vacuum that also sends out poison darts or something, right? That's a situation where you might want to regulate. That's want to
awesome.
regulate.
Where do I get one of those?
Exactly. You might want it, but the regulators and me personally would hope that you wouldn't buy it, so it might be regulated. There's also concerns about data privacy that pop up in any kind of new technology that's meant for consumers. And I think it's fair to be really concerned about that and trying to build better frameworks to make sure that people's personal data isn't leaked through improper collection or storage practices, and to make sure it's not misused by the companies themselves. Nowadays, we have multiple state laws. GDPR is also in effect, and that usually governs the big consumer electronics companies. And so it's not as big of an issue as it might have been, 5 or 6 years ago. We're having less data breaches. But that's also a concern that might be regulated. However, the ability to purchase a product for a lower price, or the ability for two companies to merge and create better products together, really isn't something that consumers should be as concerned about, unless it's something like they're going to drive prices up and drive down quality. That should be the only consideration for antitrust in this context.
And you just mentioned it, and this is a big thing. The thing that folks got to remember, when it was Walmart, always low prices. That's because they were so big they could drive down prices. You detail it with Amazon, this technology, like the robot vacuums, like Ring Doorbell. You mentioned both of these examples. It's Amazon's size and their market share and their ability to distribute these products and deliver these products. That's what's driving down costs on this really amazing cutting edge new technology that everybody wants, isn't it?
Yes, the economies of scale. If it's competing with a mom and pop shop selling, let's say it's a toy store, and they're competing with the toy store who has a set list of suppliers, set list of customers in one small town, obviously Amazon has an advantage. And that is one of the concerns of some of the recent antitrust reform efforts, is the smaller shops. But you have to consider which one's better for consumers, not so much other businesses, because at the end of the day, it should be about lowering prices. I mean, we're headed for economic hardship, or we may have hit finally the end of the worst of it, but we were headed for economic hardship, and things like this were extremely important for consumers.
Yeah. Caden Rosenbaum joining. We're going to take a quick break. We come back. We're going to continue to talk about Amazon, robot vacuums, some other stuff Amazon does, like Kindle, something I've been a fan of for a long, long time. Caden Rosenbaum joining us, talking Amazon when Heard Tell continues right after this. Folks, if you've listened to the Heard Tell program, you've heard our friend Gabriella Hoffman, but you need to make sure you're checking out her podcast, District of Conservation. It's a podcast exploring the nuances of true conservation efforts from DC and beyond. From topic discussions to exclusive interviews with conservation and energy newsmakers, Gabriella keeps listeners appraised of the latest news stories while elevating important voices. Listen to District of Conservation on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are played. Welcome back to Heard Tell. Caden Rosenbaum joining us, another one of our great Young Voices contributors. He's one of them lawyer folks, but for the purposes of this conversation, we're not going to hold that against him. He's been writing about Amazon a little bit. Let's talk two products. We mentioned one of them already, and we're going to get into the other one. People, if you're one of those people that Amazon is just the big bad in the world, I think it's fair for them to hear this part of the story. Let's take Kindle, something I absolutely love because I'm an avid reader. When Kindle came out, this was one of my favorite things that ever happened was, I can e-read Kindle. I remember when I was in the hospital in 2016, that was a, godsend. I could just e-read and couldn't have books and stuff. I've been a fan of Kindle since it came out. Kindle today is very different than when it first came out. In fact, e-publishing in general is very different than it came out. And this is an example of Amazon, frankly, because, I'm a self-published writer too. I've been down that road. This is an example of Amazon. I think some people complain about it, but for my most positively experienced for the most part. They've made it cheaper. They've made it more accessible. And somebody just sitting in their house somewhere can put something on Amazon and get it theoretically in front of millions of people. This is pretty amazing technology. And I think sometimes we don't stop and realize just what a ground shift something like Kindle and other e-readers too, but Kindle's the big one. What a difference that has made over time, do we?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's incredible, really. Every book behind me here, at least as many as I could, I have in PDF form because that's where I read them. Personally, I use the Remarkable tablet because I can write on it and make notes and things. But Kindle has just been an incredible innovation over the last decade or so. It started out being really, really expensive. And these days you can get one for like $100 and you can choose whether you want ads or not to make it even cheaper. There's the Kindle Fire, there's the regular e-reader, there's all kinds of things to compete with. And as far as, self-published authors that can now use Amazon as a platform for publishing, it's been incredible. I mean, there's one book that I'm a really big fan of, and it's Follow Me to Alaska, written by one of my former neighbors who moved out to Alaska with her husband, wrote this book and gained huge following. I think she made it to the New York Times bestseller list. And then behind me is From Harvard to Homeless by Franklin Lee. And this is his second book that he has on Amazon, which is just a great story of his journey into van life and what that's been like. He's also in policy. And so he's a policy professional who's had to navigate van life at the same time. It's a great book. For small publishers like that, Amazon is huge. You don't have to go to Penguin Publishing House to make sure that you're getting your work out there. It's not like, to make a reference to Breakfast at Tiffany's, it's not like The 9 Lives by Paul Varjak, where it shows promise, right? It's huge. You can put your book out there and let readers decide. That's really great.
It is great. In fact, I still have physical Kindles, but I've got the app on my phone now. I just read it off my phone because I've got a big, screen, and I've got the desktop app too. The other part of that is, and we've told people on the show before, you mentioned the PDFs. There is so much of classical literature, things that are out of print, things that are out of date, and also almost every academic paper, with a couple of exceptions, you can get the PDFs for free. There is so much knowledge for free that you can get through Kindle and other e-readers too. As long as you got a PDF reader, the same trick works. You can literally go on Kindle and just go show me all the free stuff. And it's exactly more reading than you'll ever do in your entire, if 3 lifetimes you couldn't read it all. That's an amazing piece of technology that actually has some good practical implications. You put it this way, that this was an example of Amazon continuing to improve consumer products. Talk about it this way, though, a little bit of your lawyer hat again. Consumer products and improving for the consumer isn't just variety. It's also advancements in technology. It's also consumer choice. It's also consumers feeling like they're getting quality for the product. Amazon seems to be big enough that they can do all those things at the same time. It doesn't make them perfect, but being a big company, that really does free them up to do those sorts of things, doesn't it? Because sometimes they can be like, yeah, we can take a bath on these new authors because we know we're going to get more people onto our subscription service or whatever the case may be.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, just to quote a movie about Steve Jobs, how do they know what they want, consumers? How do consumers know what they want if they haven't even seen it, right? And Amazon, as well as Apple and Google and Facebook and Meta, are able to try new things, show consumers products that they may not have considered beforehand, and really push them out at the scale that they need to make them adopted. And some of the things that they pushed out, consumers didn't even know they wanted, like VR headsets, for example, from Meta. Google's got the Nest, and the Amazon Alexa is another product that was just something that people didn't know they wanted until they saw it, and it was great. The Kindle e-reader is just another example. I think you could always pull PDFs down on your computer, but to have it in your hand, just like a book where you needed a nightlight in bed to read it as you went to sleep, that was huge. And you could carry 10 or 12 books in your backpack without the weight of like 100 pounds of pages, right? That's huge. That's a great improvement to technology.
Yeah, and I was an online college student. I did most of my college online. I was there for the changeover from they shipped you your books to everything's on ebook now. And now my 2 high schoolers, they have almost no school books. Everything's online. Of course, they're issued laptops and everything else, but all their books are in line. This is all within the last, 15 years. It's a huge groundswell. Let's talk about another one that we see. We don't think about this one as much, but iRing and the doorbell cameras and the smart doorbells. Amazon bought out Ring in 2018. I didn't think about this. I was looking at your Twitter feed when you were tweeting about this, though. There's two times we see these a lot. One is what you did, where the cat starts licking it and it becomes a cute pet photo.
Yeah.
We just saw it in the tragic Anne Hesh thing out in Hollywood. We saw it in the police shooting video a couple of weeks ago. More and more, we're getting instant breaking news out of doorbell feeds. It's become, now we got it on the front of our house. This is a major technology shift too, not just for home security and things like that. This has become a new form of media almost too, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a form of content creation, or it's a tool for content creation at this point. I mean, I saw a video, it's one of my favorites. It's of whenever the power plant exploded in Texas here recently, the night sky lit up in purple because it was a chemical plant, right? And this guy comes running out in his underwear to his front porch and is yelling all kinds of expletives. And I think it's really funny to just watch this guy standing in his underwear with his hands on his hips. He's a classic Texas guy. Reminds me of my dad almost, because I'm from Texas as well. Ring is all kinds of content creation for those reasons, but it can also capture really important things like shootings or locating whenever a suspect left a store. It was definitely them. And my colleague, Leslie Corbley, you had on the show recently, has an article about Ring and the privacy concerns that come from police requesting those records and those videos. But as a consumer tool, this is great. And it's not just about content creation, it's about home security. Because before this, if someone rang your doorbell, you'd have to look through the little peephole or open the door, in my case, if you don't have a peephole. And you put yourself at risk if the person on the other side of the door is dangerous. And for a lot of people, being able to go on their phone and say, yes, who are you, even if they're not even really there, is huge. And it's always recording. So if someone does try to attack them, they've got the recording, they can take it to the police and do that. If someone's at their home and they aren't home at the time, they can also call the police and say, there's someone in my home that should not be, and they're trying to get in. And then finally, for the package thieves, I think we talked about this earlier, but with package thieves and porch pirates, that's also a huge tool because it can show first that your package was stolen and Amazon will probably replace it. Or B, that's the person who stole it. You can identify the person who stole it, catch the plates as they drive away. That's really huge. That's not just a camera in a box. That's a doorbell that can protect your home, protect your family, and help you stay safe. And that's a great innovation that Amazon purchased. Before they purchased it, it was like $200 to buy one. It's a little cost prohibitive. These days, the newer version, it's 2 years improved, is only $100. And that's not even Prime Day. That's standard price. So that's one of the benefits of Amazon acquiring a company. So they take a product that's already great, and then they lower prices and they improve the quality.
Yeah, and somebody who's had, not that my current house, but the one before that's had my home broken into, really wish I would have had something on video so we could have nabbed those folks, or at least maybe got some of the stuff back. Let's do this, though, to be fair, because we both like Amazon. But let's be fair, they're a big company. Big companies with a lot of power and a lot of money, they need accountability because things can go sideways. What's the appropriate way to hold a company like Amazon accountable? Because I know the online Reddit gets out of control. I know they're the big bully on the block, so everybody's going to have their protests against them because that's where all the money is, and that's where all the unions are focusing because they're not a union company, and so on and so forth. The average consumer, though, even if you really, really like Amazon, things you like, you want to hold them accountable so it continues because it's a good service. What are some of the practical ways we really should be trying to keep Amazon on the up and up with things, not just as consumers, but also as people who pay attention to politics as well? Is it in advocacy? Is it in providing for certain kind of regulation or preventing certain kind of regulation, as the case may be? Is it how we talk about it on social media, which obviously they're very sensitive to? What's a good, responsible way to try to hold these kind of big companies accountable, do you think?
Well, I think it all comes down to the consumer. And I really don't mean to make that the generic argument that I'm going to keep bringing up. But, as a consumer, you might just question how much you're using Amazon. Is that your sole source of purchasing products and groceries and all of that? Or are you also using other products? Because if you are concerned about power and market dominance, then you might consider, going to a grocery store instead of going to Amazon Fresh, or you might consider using Manything instead of Ring doorbells. There's a ton of different options for you out there, and if you are concerned about power, then you should just go seek out another option. Tell your friends to. It's not really about a stranglehold on the market. That's not the reality of it, and with that brings a lot of power to consumers to choose something else. If they're concerned about union wages or non-union wages and labor disputes, they should raise their voice. And that did happen during the pandemic, which forced Amazon to increase wages and make all kinds of benefits available to them. Bernie Sanders was a really big advocate for this, and I think had a really good effect on these companies by just calling them out over and over again. This isn't a new tactic. These aren't new tactics that consumers and advocates have used before. I mean, it stretches back years, but it's still a tool that's always available. And so whenever regulators come out with a reform effort because the dominance is out of control or consumers are being harmed, I always question it, because the other tools, the other mechanisms for making companies move are still available.
Yeah. Caden Rosenbaum. Okay, one more thing before we let you go. Great information on Amazon, though. But friends hold friends accountable. I was looking at your Twitter feed. I have a question. You tweeted on April the 27th, I just WebMD'd my inability to remember acronyms as a problem. And it literally just turned up more acronyms. Caden Rosenbaum, defend your tweet.
Oh, yeah. Acronyms are the bane of my existence. If I had a choice, I would force people to say what the acronym means. My wife is in digital advertising, and she's always using acronyms at me to explain how her day went. And I have to stop her every 30 seconds to say, I don't know what that means. Also, tech policy is just filled with acronyms. NFT is a new one, non-fungible tokens. That's what people should be saying, but it doesn't sound as good as NFT. Really just, if we could just get to a world where acronyms were not used, I might actually understand it a little better, and that would be great.
Yeah, I can understand where your wife using acronyms could create a snafu for your house. And as an FNG here on the new Hertel program and being the new guy, we can see where this is a problem. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Listen, let me tell you something. As somebody who was in the military and other things, don't ever do government service if you don't like acronyms, because that's all it is. It's its own language.
I'll tell you,
almost.
Google is a powerful tool for someone who doesn't know acronyms.
Hey, I ain't above Googling. An editor sent me something the other day. He's like, well, do this. And I was like, sure. Right after I Google your acronym, literally what I messaged him. I'm with you on the acronyms, my friend. Caden Rosenbaum, great information. Loved having you. We'll definitely have you back. Till folks see you on Hertel again, though, let them know where they can follow you, what you have going on, and how they can keep up with you until we see you again, my friend.
Well, first and foremost, you can find me on libertas.org, which is libertas.org. And if you want to know my funny tweets and my struggles with acronyms, you can find me on Twitter, and it's at Caden Rosenbaum. Those are the two places. That's where I'm always at. And if you need me, you can ping me there.
He's a very serious tweeter, too. It was hard to find anything jokey in his Twitter feed. He's a very sharp, smart guy. Yeah, he's got a lot of good stuff on there. Make sure you follow him. You can see it on the on-screen graphic on the YouTube. Caden Rosenbaum, great job today. We will link to all the writing that we talked about with you. Make sure you read all the pieces for yourself. Good job, buddy. Looking forward to talking to you again real soon, sir. Thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, sir.